Hi, I'm going to be doing an analysis of Superman and Me by Sherman Alexie. And I did a little pre-reading before I read it. So the author is a Native American, and he lived on the Spokane Indian Reservation. And he writes a lot about despair and poverty, violence, and alcoholism that exists in Native American lives today. So I'm just going to make a prediction there that it's going to have something to do with that, living on the reservation. I also found out that his father was an alcoholic, and he left for days and days at a time and left the family there. So maybe possibly that's why he writes a lot about this. Not sure yet. And I also read that he likes to, even though this is a really serious topic and can get kind of overwhelming, he likes to kind of put humor and wit in it to lighten the mood and everything. And a lot of his stories were also just about the struggle that Native Americans have with themselves and the sense of powerlessness that they have in American society today, where whites dominate the culture, which has been how it always has been since we came over here. So yeah, I'm gonna start reading. I learned to read with a Superman comic book. So right there, Superman and Me, Superman comic. I'm just kind of gonna put 2 and 2 together and just gonna kind of determine that that's important. Maybe this is probably gonna be a lot about him learning to read or something like that. Simple enough, I suppose. I cannot recall which particular Superman comic book I read, nor can I remember which villain he fought in that issue. I cannot remember the plot, nor the means by which I obtained the comic book. What I can remember is this. I was 3 years old, a Spokane Indian boy living with his family on the Spokane Indian Reservation in eastern Washington state. So I wrote text to text here, but it's also kind of a prediction. I don't know. He talks about his heritage here for first thing in the first paragraph. So I'm predicting that this is going to be something personal or something about his culture that he grew up in. We were poor by most standards, but one of my parents usually managed to find some minimum wage job or another, which made us middle class by reservation standards. I had a brother and 3 sisters. We lived on a combination of irregular paychecks, hope, fear, and government surplus foods. So, I did a text to world and text to self here because I did a mission trip in Arizona a few years ago, and we were actually on a Native American reservation there, and we did see a lot of this what would consider to us low income, not as high standard of life, but that is where a lot how a lot of them live on the reservations. And I learned then that was kind of historically how it was, especially since we kind of pushed them all west a while back, which is really sad. And then I also just really liked that last sentence. We lived on a combination of irregular paychecks, hope, fear, and government surplus food. So I just did author craft there, and the diction was just nice. I liked that. My father, who is one of the few Indians who went to Catholic school on purpose, was an avid reader of westerns, spy thrillers, murder mysteries, gangster epics, basketball player biographies, and anything he could find. He bought his books by the pound at Dutch's Pawn Shop, Goodwill, Salvation Army, and Value Village. This kind of reminded me of myself when I was younger. My grandma would take me to Goodwill, and I would just pick out books and books because I just loved to read so much. When he had extra money, he bought new novels at supermarkets, convenience stores, and hospital gift shops. Our house was filled with books. They were stacked in crazy piles in the bathroom, bedrooms, and living room. In a fit of unemployment-inspired creative energy, my father built a set of bookshelves and so on, filled them with a random assortment of books about the Kennedy assassination, Watergate, the Vietnam War, and the entire 23-book series of the Apache Westerns. My father loved books, and since I loved my father with an aching devotion, I decided to love books as well. So this kind of took me back to my pre-reading where I kind of made a prediction, I had read that his father was an alcoholic and wasn't always around, so, I kind of would have thought that he wouldn't really admire his father that much because of that and kind of left the rest of his family behind to fend for themselves sometimes. But, this section just makes it sound like he had a great admiration for his father, especially in that last sentence there. My father loved books, and since I loved my father with an aching devotion, not just devotion, but an aching devotion, I liked that, I decided to love books as well. So he really did admire his father, and I think that's probably where a lot of his him being a writer might have came from there. That's just a prediction. I can remember picking up my father's books before I could read. The words themselves were mostly foreign, but I still remember the exact moment when I first understood with a sudden clarity the purpose of a paragraph. So this is kind of a text to text, because earlier he said, Superman comic was one of the first things he used to read, but he couldn't really remember anything about it. But, I found this interesting that he could remember when he finally had this understanding and clarity of a purpose of a paragraph. So that just kind of made me infer that, maybe the author was, as a child, a lot more mature in literature and ways of thinking than his peers. I didn't have the vocabulary to say paragraph, but I realized that a paragraph was a fence that held words. I loved that, his kind of analogy there, paragraph was a fence that held words. The words inside a paragraph worked together for a common purpose. They had some specific reason for being inside the same fence. This knowledge delighted me. I began to think of everything in terms of paragraphs. Our reservation was a small paragraph within the United States. My family's house was a paragraph. My family's house was a paragraph distinct from the other paragraphs of the Librettes to the north, the Fords to our south, and the tribal school to the west. Inside our house, each family member existed as a separate paragraph, but still had genetics and common experiences to link us. Now, using this logic, I can see my changed family as an essay of 7 paragraphs. Mother, father, older brother, the deceased sister, my younger twin sisters, and our adopted little brother. So, I liked how he used these two, his family and the paragraph, to kind of tie together. I don't know, that was just an interesting way of putting it, that your family was a paragraph. And, the last sentence where he lists off the people in his family, I could kind of just visualize this. It kind of was funny in my head, but, you're going along reading, instead of words, you're seeing faces or people. That was just kind of funny to me. At the same time I was seeing the world in paragraphs, I also picked up that Superman comic book. So that lets me know that this was kind of the same time frame. So kind of takes me back to my inference that the author was very mature in his ways of thinking, that he would remember, coming up with the idea of a paragraph, but not what was in that Superman comic book that so many other probably young boys were reading at the time. And they probably remembered. Each panel, complete with picture, dialogue, and narrative, was a three-dimensional paragraph. In one panel, Superman breaks through a door. His suit is red, blue, and yellow. The brown door shatters into many pieces. I look at the narrative above the picture. I cannot read the words, but I assume it tells me that Superman is breaking down the door. Aloud, I pretend to read the words and say, Superman is breaking down the door. Words, dialogue, also flow out of Superman's mouth. Because he is breaking down the door, I assume he says, I am breaking down the door. Once again, I pretend to read the words and say aloud, I am breaking down the door. In this way, I learn to read. So I just liked the author's craft here. It's interesting how the pictures, they represent an action, and from there he was able to piece together generally what it was probably saying in the words. So it's kind of like a text to world almost, is what I'd define it as. That's almost how we learn how to speak as well. Visualizing things and then maybe someone helping you with the word, or kind of like hearing it or knowing what they're doing, piecing together those words. Almost the same thing there. This might be an interesting story all by itself. A little Indian boy teaches himself to read at an early age and advances quickly. He reads Grapes of Wrath in kindergarten when other children are struggling through Dick and Jane. This kind of proves that I was right, that he was at a higher mental level than kids his age. And I also want to point out, he's talking about himself, but he's doing it in a way that he doesn't directly say that it's himself, but we make the inference that it is him. If he'd been anything but an Indian boy living on the reservation, he might have been called a prodigy. I just underline that because, I believe that this is, or at least was true. I mean, we still have problems like this today, but, it's just sad that happened, that because you're not a certain skin color or ethnicity, or, have a specific heritage, you're just cast aside no matter how smart or intelligent you are. But he is an Indian boy living on the reservation and is simply an oddity. He grows into a man who often speaks of his children in the third person, as if it will somehow dull the pain and make him sound more modest than his talents. So, that kind of brings it back. The author's craft, he's acknowledging that he is talking in third person, but he's doing so by talking in third person. A smart Indian is a dangerous person, widely feared and ridiculed by Indians and non-Indians alike. I fought with my classmates on a daily basis. They wanted me to stay quiet when the non-Indian teacher asked for answers, for volunteers, for help. We were Indian children who were expected to be stupid. And, I just put text to world right there, too, because, I still believe this to be true. You hear derogatory terms and names that people call Native Americans, and they're just expected to not be as smart as, a white person, which is not to be true. I thought we would have been over this years and years and years ago, but it's still a problem today. Most lived up to those expectations inside the classroom, but subverted them on the outside. They struggled with basic reading in school, but could remember how to sing a few dozen powwow songs. They were monosyllabic. I'm sorry, I cannot say that. In front of their non-Indian teachers, but could tell complicated stories and jokes at the dinner table. They submissively ducked their heads when confronted by a non-Indian adult, but would slug it out with the Indian bully who was 10 years older. As Indian children, we were expected to fail in the non-Indian world. Those who failed were ceremonially appreciated by other Indians and appropriately pitied by non-Indians. So, here I just had a question about, like, the importance of this, and just a question in general. He obviously was opposite of most of his peers. So, like, what's gonna happen to him later in life? Is he gonna just kind of leave this culture and heritage behind because, he's obviously not accepted because he is different and he's not willing to sacrifice his education? Or, is eventually this just gonna wear on him and he's just gonna give in? I refused to fail. I was smart. I was arrogant. I was lucky. I read books late into the night until I could barely keep my eyes open. I read books at recess, then during lunch, and in the few minutes left after I had finished my classroom assignments. I read books in the car when my family traveled to powwows or basketball games. In shopping malls, I ran to the bookstores and read bits and pieces of as many books as I could. I read the books my father brought home from the pawn shops in secondhand. I read the books I borrowed from the library. I read the backs of cereal boxes. I read the newspaper. I read the bulletins posted on the walls of the school, the clinic, the tribal offices, the post office. I read junk mail. I read auto repair manuals. I read magazines. I read anything that had words and paragraphs. I read with equal parts joy and desperation. I loved those books, but I also knew that love had only one purpose. I was trying to save my life. So right here, the author's craft, where it's joy and desperation, those are opposites, but he really brings them together in a way that I think we can all understand. And then when he says, save my life at the end, it's a little surprising that he would say that, and it's kind of gives me a little bit of a question, is he trying to get out of this culture and heritage? Is that what he means by saving his life? Which is what I think he does mean. Despite all the books I read, I am still surprised I became a writer. And right now I'm kind of noticing a change in the way that he is speaking about himself. He's not using, that boy or him. He's using I. So, despite all the books I read, I am still surprised I became a writer. I was going to be a pediatrician. These days I write novels, short stories, and poems. I visit schools and teach creative writing to Indian kids. So he's giving back, which I think is really important to this story. In all my years in the reservation school system, I was never taught how to write poetry, short stories, or novels. I was certainly never taught that Indians wrote poetry, short stories, and novels. So that's kind of surprising because, he was never taught these things in, like, the regular public school system that he went through on the reservation. But, yeah, here he is giving back and teaching kids how to do this. And, he's very successful at what he does. So that was just a little bit of information that I was just a little surprised by. Writing was something beyond Indians. I cannot recall a single time that a guest teacher visited the reservation. There must have been visiting teachers. Who were they? Where are they now? Do they exist? I visit the schools as often as possible. The Indian kids crowd the classroom. Many are writing their own poems, short stories, and novels. They have read my books. They have read many other books. So, this kind of just makes me infer that, times are changing, especially in this school system. And, maybe this is due to, like, those few people when the author was a child that, they stood up for their education, and instead of just acting dumb and not answering the teacher, they really engaged themselves. And, just takes those couple of people to start doing that, and within time, more and more people are going to be following suit. let's see. And then it says they are trying to save their lives. Then there are the sullen and already defeated Indian kids who sit in the back rows and ignore me with theatrical precision. The pages of their notebooks are empty. They carry neither pencil nor pen. They stare out the window. They refuse and resist. So, again, there was the save their lives right there. That kind of ties back to when he was trying to save his own life. Now these children are trying to save their lives by engaging themselves. Kind of proving my inference correct that, not necessarily trying to get out of the culture, but trying to get out of this cycle. And this kind of hits me too right here, where they talk about these defeated Indian kids, with their empty notebooks and no pencils or pens, that kind of hits me because I am an education major right now. And, of course, growing up where I did, we have a very good school system, but there's still those few people, who were like that, and it makes me think of them, and it makes me think of my future classroom, and the children that I'm going to teach, I just hurts my heart that some of this, like, there are children out there who just are already so defeated that they don't even see the reason why they need to continue with their education. They refuse and resist. Books, I say to them, books, I say. I throw my weight against their locked doors. The doors hold. I am smart. I am arrogant. I am lucky. I am trying to save our lives. So, author craft, again, there's repetition within just these couple paragraphs. Save my life, save their lives, save our lives, He just really wants them to break out of this cycle. And again, that last part, I throw my weight against their locked doors and the doors hold. Again, that just kind of takes me to the future of my future classroom. That's something that, definitely something in this culture that is more of a problem, but that's something that I'm going to have to deal with someday. Possibly, just students who don't feel the worth or sense the worth of an education. So it talks about the culture in which the Native American children are taught they are not smart enough to be a part of much else than the reservation life. And that is my analysis of Superman and Me.